Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This event is part of the Asia House Bagri Foundation Literature Festival. My name is Anna Temby, and I'm the Literature Programme Manager at Asia House. If you're tweeting this evening, we have a few different Twitter handles at Asia House, but the one for tonight is at Asia House Arts, and our hashtag is AsiaLitFest. There'll be a chance for you to ask your questions at the end of this talk, and both Jeffrey and Abir will be signing their books downstairs. I'm sure you know this event coincides with Jeffrey's latest book being published today, Heads You Win, so you may be amongst the first to get your hands on this book tonight. I'd just like to quickly introduce our moderator for this evening before I hand over to her. Erica Wagner was born in New York City. Her most recent book is Chief Engineer Washington Roebling, the Man Who Built the Brooklyn Bridge. She's the author of Gravity Stories, Ariel's Gift, Ted Hughes Silver Plath, and The Story of Birthday Letters, and Seizure, a novel. She is the editor of First Light, a celebration of Alan Garner. Twice a judge of the Man Booker Prize, she was literary editor of The Times for 17 years and is now contributing literary editor for Harper's Bazaar and a contributing writer for The New Statesman. She was the recipient of the Eccles British Library Writers Award in 2014, and she's a lecturer in creative writing at Goldsmiths University of London. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Erica Wagner, Jeffrey Archer, and Abir Mukherjee. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I really am thrilled to be here and on Jeffrey Archer's publication day, no less. I will introduce them both. We will chat. There'll be a bit of reading. And then, as Anna said, there will be a chance for you to ask your questions at the end. I have been enjoined to tell you that Jeffrey Archer is in a dinner jacket because he was worried you'd all feel underdressed. That he's actually going to a charity auction for the British Legion at the Imperial War Museum afterwards, so don't worry. There are certain authors for whom the words needs no introduction absolutely can't be avoided. And Lord Archer of Weston-super-Mare is certainly one of them. Jeffrey Archer, as he is known on the cover of his books, has been a dynamo of the literary scene since 1975, when his first novel, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, established him as an author to watch, though he's revealed that that book was first rejected by over a dozen publishers, and he has rightly remarked that persistence is a vital skill for an author. Cain and Abel, published a few years later, has been an enduring bestseller and was made into a television miniseries. He's been going strong ever since, writing plays, short stories, books for children, and his fascinating collaboration with the theologian Francis J. Maloney, The Gospel According to Judas. His books have since sold over 30 million copies worldwide, and they include the compelling series The Clifton Chronicles, bringing to life in 7 volumes the key historical and political events of the 20th century over the course of one family's history, with all their triumphs and tragedies. He has just published his first standalone novel for a decade, Heads You Win. And all the while, he's had a fascination with India, a place he's traveled to often. That is a subject we're going to discuss tonight in company with Abir Mukherjee, who grew up in the west of Scotland, as you will know as soon as he opens his mouth.
It's a good thing.
At the age of 15, his best friend made him read Gorky Park by Martin Cruz Smith. Good advice. And he's been a fan of crime fiction ever since. The child of immigrants from India, a rising man, his debut novel was inspired by a desire to learn more about a crucial period in Anglo-Indian history, the decades leading up to independence, that seem to have been almost forgotten. Val McDermid called it one of the most exciting debuts she'd read in years, and it won the Harville Secker Daily Telegraph crime writing competition, and is the first in a new series starring Captain Sam Wyndham and Surrender Not Banerjee, his sergeant. He has since published 2 more books in the series, following the pair of them, A Necessary Evil and his latest book, Smoke and Ashes, both of them highly praised. Please give another round of applause. When we were sitting in the green room, I said I was going to start. Really, I have two questions. First, I would like to ask you, Jeffrey, tell us about your fascination with India. And then I discern that the pair of you know each other, that this is not the first time you've met.
No. This is the first time.
This is the first time?
Yes, and I don't want to see him ever again.
Okay. Well, obviously, they got on so brilliantly.
No. Blooming Scot.
He's already
he can't make
taken
up
out
his
a
mind.
restraining order.
No, he can't make up his mind if he's Scottish or Indian unless we're discussing cricket. And then it becomes
Then
obvious.
I'm Scottish.
Now, no cricket. The one thing
No cricket.
I can't do. I'm a woman of many parts, but cricket I cannot. So
cannot
let's
have it.
hear about
This
India.
is cultural oppression. You do realise that.
I love India and have from an early age. I went first to Calcutta as a young member of Parliament when I was 30 and fell in love with the place. And when I started writing, the Indians are the biggest readers on earth, number one. And number two, if you buy a book in England, 2.3 people read it. If you buy a book in America, 2.4 people read it. If you buy a book in India, 10 people read it. So when the Times of India said 50 million people had read Cain and Abel, I said that I rang the editor and said that's just not possible. He said, Jeffrey, it goes around villages. And then, of course, as all you lot know, they then steal it as well. They steal the book and they take it away and they buy it at London Airport and they fly to Mumbai, and 3 days later it's on the streets at half the price. Their view of copyright is the right to copy.
And yet you still, but you launch your books there, is that?
And many people say, you angry, Jeffrey, that you see little boys in the streets holding these books up and selling them at half price. No, I want to be read. Any way of getting to a young reader is wonderful. In fact, I got off of the plane at Mumbai, and those of you who know that journey from the airport to the center of town, which you grow very old during that period, a little boy knocked on my window. I wound it down. He said, "Would you like the latest Jeffrey Archer?" I said, "I am the latest Jeffrey Archer." So yes, I have a passion for India, but despite your understandable shortcomings, I would say, I also do love cricket, and you can't meet an Indian and they know straight away if you love it. Only Indians in this room will understand what I'm about to say, and you will just have to
be an ignorant.
Cricket.
American. Can you imagine?
An American.
American.
Cricket is VVS Laxman and Rahul Dravid batting all day against the Australians when they followed on and winning the match the next day. That's what cricket is.
This is author bonding happening here.
Actually, it's
privileged.
not, because I
It's not.
pointed out to Lord Archer that the
Jeffrey.
best in... No, I can't say that. My father would slap me from heaven if you called him Jeffrey, he's Lord Archer. You can't call him. But
That was racist. That was disgraceful.
my dad was Jamaican. That's how he sounded. No, but I pointed out to Jeffrey, the Lord Archer, that the best Indian cricketer was Sourav Ganguly, and you disagreed.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
No.
I can think of 10 Indian cricketers who were greater.
Before we come back to cricket,
Do we want to
I
leave
am
cricket?
going to... Just for a moment.
Okay, fine.
I am going to ask you, Abir, a little bit about the background to this series of books.
Mm-hmm.
And they're set, the first in the series, I think it starts in 1919.
That's right.
This is 1921.
Yep.
Why this period of history?
Well, before that, let me just tell you how I got into writing. I hated my day job. I'm an accountant by profession, and the doors are locked, so you can't leave. the Lord Archer's already called me a hypocrite back there because I'm a socialist, but I'm also... Anyway. Bringing the system down from the inside.
Get on with it.
So, yes, the books. Well, for me, it was a search for identity. You know, I grew up in Britain. I am British, but my parents are of Indian origin, and I always felt that this period in our history is one that we brush under the carpet. We either Downtonify it and think of it as tea on the lawn with the Viceroy, or we just don't talk about it. And I think also Indians tend to romanticize that period. And for me, growing up between both cultures, neither of that really fitted. So I would come back from school, I would learn something, and my dad would say, "That's not right." And half the time he'd be wrong, and half the time the school would be wrong. So for me, it was really about finding out what really happened in this period of history. And that's what started the journey. And you know, the first book's 1919, the second one's 1920, the third one's 1921. You can tell I'm an accountant. I had to have them, you know, in that series, and they will continue like that. But essentially, it is me trying to find out about what really happened in that period, because I think we've lost so much.
And why through a crime novel?
Yeah, well, one, I wanted people to read the books, so I didn't want to write a history book. I wanted to write something that people would pick up. And as you can tell from my accent, I come from north of the border. My father looked at a map and said, "What's the coldest, wettest place I can raise a family?" So I ended up in Scotland. But we have this tradition in Scotland, started by people like William McIlvanney and then brought on by people like Val McDermid and Ian Rankin, of the crime novel as a medium to explore social issues. And so it was very natural for me to use the crime novel to look at this period in time. And also, as you said, I'm a big fan of books where you have the protagonist upholding a system that he doesn't necessarily believe in. So the Martin Kruse-Smith's Arkady Renko series, Philip Kerr's Bernie Gunther series. This is the sort of fiction that I loved reading. I should also point out that when I was 14, I read Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, and it was one of the books that really got me reading for pleasure. And I read, Cain and Abel, First Among Equals, a whole series, because my father, and I have to say my father-in-law as well, were huge fans of Lord Archer.
And that reading for pleasure, which is so important, we were talking before everyone came in about the gift of storytelling. And that's something that's always been, to me, is your great gift, this ability to spin a yarn. And also you have looked through the prism of history. I mentioned the Clifton Chronicles, and some of that is set, in the 6th volume, is set in India. Did you always know?
Going back for a moment on your first part of your question, you are quoted on the back of the book.
Am I?
Because you wrote an article in the Times saying just what you said then. There you are. You wrote an article in the Times saying that storytelling was a gift. And I've quoted you all over the world. When people ask me the question...
And where's my money?
And people ask me, when people ask me the question, what do you feel about storytelling? I say, no less than the literary editor of the Times said it was a God-given gift.
Erica, you give me a quote, I'll give you half the money. That's
okay.
20p.
So I agree with you totally. Just occasionally, you get someone who combines both. And in India, there's no doubt in my mind that R.K. Narayan combines both. I think he's not only a great writer, I think he's also a great storyteller. Because when you can write a story about a man in a small village who's a tax collector and demands you turn the page, you're very special. And that's what you said, and I learned from many years ago, not to be frightened to say it's a gift.
Well, and that's also, I think, the great human need is to know, and thrillers and crime novels do this particularly well, I think. We have this great need to know what happens next.
Yes.
And that's really what keeps us going in our lives, as well as reading books. Maybe let's have a little taste. Would you read now?
Could I just say before, I agree with what you just said, But I say to young writers when they come to see me and are thinking about their first book, write about what you know about. So many Indians have said to me, yes, there is a piece in Kamathiyar. You're quite right. There's a chapter in Kamathiyar set in Mumbai. But the truth is, they'll catch you out if you start writing about something you don't know about. And Abir's greatest strength, I think, having read his book, his first book, is that I had no doubt I was in India. I had no doubt the smell, the touch, the feel. He'd got it. And I remember reading it thinking, many Indians have said, Geoffrey, we'd like you to write a book about India. And having read Abir's first book, I knew I could never do it. He captured it on every page, little innuendos, little comments that can only come from someone who's been raised with that background. So I say to people, don't write ghost stories because you think they're in. Don't write sex stories because you think they're popular. Do what you feel safe with.
Good advice. Can we hear a little bit?
Yes.
Now, this is the new book, which is not set in India. It is set in, well, it's set all over but it begins in Russia.
Yes, I will read it if I may, but may I be allowed to say what inspired it?
Yes, of course you may.
Do you want me to read over there, or do you want me to read?
I mean, you can
I'd rather
read
actually,
where you like to be.
What? Hello. People often ask me where I get my ideas. And taking Erica's point, it is a God-given gift. I get up in the morning and start writing at 6. I don't know where it's going. I haven't got a clue. It just happens. But I confess in this particular book that I'd read Colin Powell's amazing memoirs, My American Journey. And in it, his wife, Maud, who was born in Jamaica, couldn't make up her mind if she wanted to go to the United States for a better life or to go to Britain for a better life. And she chose, as we now all know, she chose America. And Colin was born in Harlem. But I wondered what it would have been like if he'd been born in Hackney. Because I was convinced 60 years ago he would not have become a young lieutenant at Sandhurst. He would not have become a field marshal. He would not have followed Alec Douglas Hume and Peter Carrington as Foreign Secretary. So in my mind was the concept, the idea that what would you have? So I changed the position. I'm going to put a boy in Russia, 16 years old, who's won a scholarship to the prestigious foreign language school in Moscow and has everything ahead of him. His father is a trade union leader, and he decides he wants to start his own trade union, and the KGB kill him. The 2 pages I'm going to read come after all that has happened. Elena looked up when she heard the door on the far side of the room open and stared in horror as Alexander came charging towards them. Polyakov turned around quickly, pushed Elena to one side and reached for his gun, but the young man was now only a yard away. Alexander lifted the pot off the stove and hurled the remains of the hot stew into Polyakov's face. The major staggered back, fell to the floor, delivering a stream of invective that Elena feared would be heard at the other end of the yard. "You'll hang for this," Polyakov yelled as he grabbed the edge of the table and tried to pull himself up. But before he could utter another word, Alexander swung the heavy pot into his face. Polyakov collapsed to the floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut, blood pouring from his nose and mouth. Mother and son didn't move as they stared at their fallen adversary. Alexander was the first to recover. He picked up Polyakov's tie from the floor and quickly bound his hands behind his back, then grabbed a napkin from the table and stuffed it in his mouth. Elena hadn't moved. She just stared ahead as if paralyzed. "Be ready to leave the moment I get back," said Alexander, grabbing Polyakov by the ankles. He dragged him out of the kitchen, down the corridor, and not stopping until he reached the lavatories, where he crammed the Major into the end cubicle. It took all his strength to lift him onto the toilet and then tie him to the pipe. He locked the door from the inside and, climbing up onto the Major's legs, pulled himself over the top and lured himself onto the floor. He ran back to the kitchen to find his mother on her knees, sobbing. He knelt down beside her. "No time for tears, Mama," he said. "We have to get going before the bastard has a chance to come after us." He helped her slowly to her feet, and while she put on her coat and collected her small suitcase from the larder, he gathered up Polyakov's uniform, belt, and gun and dumped them in the nearest waste bin. Taking Elena firmly by the hand, he led her out of the kitchen to the back door. He opened it tentatively, stepped outside, and checked in every direction before standing aside to allow her to join him. "Where did you agree to meet Uncle Koala?" he said. Responsibility once again changing hands. "Head towards those 2 cranes," said Elena, pointing to the far end of the dock. "Whatever you do, Alexander, don't mention what just happened to your uncle. It's better he doesn't know, because as long as everyone thinks he was at the football match, there will be no way of connecting him with us." As Alexander led his mother to Dock 3, her legs felt so weak she could hardly place one foot in front of the other. Even if she'd considered changing her mind at the last moment, she now realized she had no choice but to try and escape. The alternative didn't bear thinking about. She kept her eyes on the 2 idle cranes that Koala had said would be their signpost, and as they drew nearer, they saw a lone figure step from behind the 2 large wooden crates by the entrance of the deserted warehouse. "What kept you?" Koala said anxiously, his eyes darting in every direction. "We came as quickly as we could," said Elena, without explanation. Alexander stared down into the crates to see 6 cases of vodka neatly stacked in each one, the agreed tariff for a one-way trip to. "All you have to do now," said Koala, "is decide whether you want to go to America or England." "Why don't we let fate decide?" said Alexander. He took a 5-kopeck coin from his pocket, balanced it on the end of his thumb. "Heads America, tails England," he said. He flipped it high in the air. The coin bounced on the dockside before coming to rest at his feet. Alexander bent down and looked at the image for a moment, then picked up his mother's suitcase and his lunchbox and put them in the bottom of the chosen crate. Elena then climbed inside and waited for her son to join her. They crouched down and clung on to each other as Koala placed the lid firmly back on top of the crate. Although it took him only a few minutes to hammer down 12 nails into the lid, Elena was already listening for another sound, the sound of heavy boots heading towards them. The lid of the crate being ripped off, and the 2 of them being dragged out to face the triumphant Major Polyakov. Koala tapped the side of the crate with the palm of his hand, and suddenly they felt themselves yanked off the ground. The crate swung gently from side to side as they were lifted higher and higher into the air before it began its slow descent towards the hold of one of the ships. Then, without warning, the crate landed with a thud. Elena could only wonder if they would spend the rest of their lives regretting not climbing into the other crate. Thank you.
Many novels spring from that, a moment of inspiration when you suddenly think, this is a story I'm I'm fascinated by, and I want to explore it in a different way. Abir, maybe tell us a bit, not only about the background of Smoke and Ashes, but the series as a whole. Did you know when you wrote A Rising Man that it was going to be a series?
Yeah, in my head, I planned to do a book from every year from 1919 to 1945. And now I'm 3.5 books in, I'm thinking that's going to be tough. But essentially I wanted to, my first inspiration was the Bengal famine of 1943, which is something that we don't talk about. You know, at a time when 3 to 5 million Jews were dying in the Holocaust, 3 million Bengalis died of famine, of a man-made famine. And we don't talk about this. And this really was the story that I wanted to tell. But I didn't want to start there. I wanted to start earlier, because I wanted to look at the whole period. Because yes, we have these atrocities, but we also have the other side of the coin. I think there's something very, very special about the relationship between the British and the Indians. If you look at the 20s and 30s, when the whole world was going mad, you have fascism, you have communism, you have any dissent met with a bullet or a gas chamber or a gulag. In that atmosphere, the British and the Indians played out a very unique, to that point, unique freedom struggle, a non-violent freedom struggle. And it takes two parties to do that. If you did the same thing, say, you were facing Stalin or Hitler, what were the chances that that would succeed? Why is it today that we have a statue of Gandhi in Parliament Square opposite Churchill? That to me is fascinating. There's no precedent for that. You go to Paris, you don't see a statue of Ho Chi Minh or Ben Bella. You don't. There's something unique about that relationship. That also led to things like Dr. Martin Luther King's civil rights movement in the States. It led to Nelson Mandela's struggle in South Africa. But it started with the British and the Indians. And it took both parties to do that. And to me, that was fascinating. So I wanted to really understand, what is it about these two peoples that in that world climate played out such, to me, an amazing, freedom struggle. Sorry, I've run out of words. I'm not as good as the master storyteller. But that was my inspiration.
And is that why? So also, the other thing that I'm very admiring of, and that would make me nervous, I think, is committing to, so you have these two characters, you have Sam and his sergeant, and you're sticking with them. I mean, you've got to, how do you know that they're going to take you through?
Well, to me, I should say that there's Sam Wyndham, who's my main character, and then there's the Indian sergeant, Surendranath Banerjee, but being British, you can't pronounce words with names with more than one syllable, so he's known as Surendranath. But there is a precedent for that, because there was a Surendranath Banerjee who became known as Surendranath and was actually knighted. So he was Sir Surendranath Banerjee. So I wish I'd come up with that, but I hadn't. But really, they're both sort of parts of my personality. So sitting between the two cultures as I do, I think Sam is my more British side of things. He's also my more cynical side of things, whereas Surendranath is the sort of more optimistic side of me. And he has my chicken legs as well. He has my Indian skinny legs, which is not good in a kilt. So, but in the fourth book that I'm writing now, a lot of it is set in the past, in 1905. So we just have Sam, and Surendranath comes in basically for the last 40%, and I'm writing that now, and it was almost like a friend coming back. Having them both together made me smile. So, I think I need both of them to be there, because they feed off each other. They ask the questions that my Indian half would ask my British half, or my British half asks my Indian half. And I think I need them for that reason.
That's fascinating. And it's very interesting what you say about picking a moment in what is part of a global struggle. And with Heads You Win, you decided to pick, you told this wonderful story about Colin Powell, but you decided to set this in Russia. Why? Russia is rather in the news at the moment.
Well, to be fair, when I got the idea 5 years ago, and when I began writing 3 years ago, I had no idea that the Russians would be on every front page right the way through after I'd finished the book. And that has come as a shock. And of course, The press have been fascinated by that because they think, wait a minute, but they forget that Russia wasn't on every front page 3 years ago. Salisbury has created a whole new atmosphere and thought. And no, I didn't anticipate it. And no, I had no idea it was coming.
I don't know, I think Lord Archer planned the whole thing.
Whole thing.
It's just great PR, isn't it?
That's right, that's right. But what was it? Of course, it wasn't on every front page. So how did you put your pin in the map, as it were?
No question in my mind that the history of the last century is based on the United States, Britain, and Russia. Yes, of course, there are lots of other things going on, but they were the three big nations in the last war. And they're still, if you take Europe as an entity, they're still the three big entities on Earth. And I wanted my hero to come out of Russia because I was fascinated by the idea that if a Russian boy had gone to the United States, he couldn't get into Congress. It's the one country on Earth you wouldn't be able to get if you just arrived from Russia. But I do believe he could get into the British Parliament. And I saw that difference and found it fascinating.
That's very interesting. But and of course, these are those great nations, but India too is a...
I thought you were going to say Scotland.
Scotland, of course, is a global powerhouse. And it is. But India is as well, and I wonder how you think about, and I'm going to ask you to read a bit in a minute, but one of the reasons I think we read historical novels is it's interesting to see how moments in history shed light on the present, and I wonder if modern day India is also in your mind as you're writing.
It is. But to be honest with you, I think that I'd like to just sort of change that question slightly to talk about, modern themes and how they affect us as writers. So my fourth book, the one that I'm writing right now, I've been very depressed, like most of us have, or many of us have, by, what's going on in the world, the fear that we have, the rise of populism, the fear of immigration and integration. And I wanted to look at that, and I realized that we as a country have a very decent record when it comes to integrating immigrants. And, Lord Archer talks about this Russian coming into the Houses of Parliament, which is absolutely possible. Do you know when the first Indian MP was in the Houses of Parliament? 1890. 1890. That says something about this country.
Yeah.
And half of my book is set in the East End of London, the fourth one, with the Jewish community. Because, we forget that between 1880 and 1914, we had hundreds of thousands of Eastern European Jews came to this country seeking refuge from persecution in Eastern Europe. And the press reacted exactly the same way that they react towards Muslims today, in the same streets in the East End, doing the same jobs. And yet here we are, 100 years later. If you put aside the aberration of Corbyn and the current Labour Party, which I think is ideologically driven, the Jews are integrated. They have their own culture, but they are British. If you look at the other communities that we have here, nobody mentions the Hindus or the Sikhs, the 1.2 million people from those backgrounds, because most of them came as middle class. And it's much easier to integrate the middle classes than it is the working classes, because it comes down to opportunity. And I would say, as the son of middle-class brown immigrants, I have a better chance in life in this country than a white working-class boy from Grimsby, say. And we confuse immigration and lack of opportunity in this country. And that's really what I'm dealing with in the fourth book, by looking back and saying, actually, we're really good in this country. And my father came here in the 60s, and he faced racism, but he stayed, because this country offered him opportunities that he did not have in his own country. And he spent half his life here and half his life there. And when he went in Calcutta because he was on holiday, but, he was as British as he was Indian. And we shouldn't forget just how tolerant and decent this country is.
I had the honor of giving the Asian Business Awards this year, and in front of me were 40 people waiting to find out if they'd won one of the 7 awards. And they were all like him.
Scottish.
Shush. They were all like him. And I made them turn round and turn their backs on me, because at the other end of the room were the parents who'd made it possible. The Indian parents who scraped, who fought, who worked to make sure that he could do what he's achieved. And they're the generation we must thank, that they stuck it out, they stuck here, and they've produced a generation that once we come out of Brexit, it won't be, gosh, isn't the empire over? It'll be, please come back, we need you.
Do you know what? Yeah.
And I think that it's funny. I live in the East End of London, and what you say makes me think of that wonderful, was originally on Fournier Street, a Huguenot church in the 18th century, and then my grandmother actually came from Eastern Europe, settled in the East End, went to America. I came back. So in her day, that church had become a synagogue, and now it is a mosque. So the same building serving this. And the cloth trade, as you say, done by all of these people in this area. But maybe you'll read a little bit.
Yeah, well, you see,
for us.
I will do. I've chosen a passage in this third book. I should set the scene. The third book is set in 1921, which is the year Gandhi launched his first mass non-cooperation movement. At the beginning of the year, he stood up and said, if you give me non-violent non-cooperation, by the end of the year, I will give you independence. And it was the first time in the history of India that there was a mass movement, that it wasn't the intelligentsia, it was the working classes, the peasants that came out. And in my head, I imagine it was much like the miners' strike, a battle of attrition between a government that was intransigent and these people who were going out on strike and losing their livelihoods. And all of that comes to a head in December of that year, because so much has been sacrificed and so little has been gained. And in that atmosphere, the government send the Prince of Wales, who later becomes Edward from Mrs. Simpson. They send him to India, and he arrives in Calcutta on Christmas Day on a goodwill mission. You can't make it up. So that history I thought was amazing. So my book is set in the final couple of weeks of that year, and it deals with the hunt for a killer that Sam and Surrender Not are after. I'm not going to read a bit from the main body of it, but I should point out that Sam spends a lot of his time pining after an Anglo-Indian woman called Annie Grant. And Sam really ruined his chances by accusing her of murder earlier on, which is never a good thing.
Never a good thing. Not a good gambit.
No, it's not. But, he's still pining, and in his sort of British, way, he's still after her. Now, she's come into money, and she is now seeing an American. She has an American admirer, and this has rather put Sam's nose out of joint.
Those Yanks.
Yeah. So, but being a rich woman of Anglo-Indian origin in that hothouse atmosphere of the last few months of 1921, she's also on the receiving end of some violence, because people see the Anglo-Indians as siding with the British, and she's had windows broken. So Sam is supposed to be investigating this, but he's not doing anything because, there's a killer on the loose, and her windows are secondary of importance. But he feels he needs to go round there. So he goes round the house and he sees a big car parked out front, and he doesn't know whose it is. So he says to the maid, "Whose car is that?" I asked as we traversed the hallway. "Mr. Schmidt, Sahib," she said breathlessly, as though he were the Pope. I didn't like the sound of that. "German?" I asked. No, American," she beamed. Even worse. She opened the door to the drawing room and ushered me in. At the window stood a tall, blonde chap with a moustache on his face and a drink in his hand. He wore khaki trousers with turn-ups and creases that looked sharp enough to slice bread, and the shirt, the whiteness of which was matched only by that of his ridiculously perfect teeth. "Mem Sahib will be down shortly," said the maid. Preceded by his cologne, the man walked over and proffered a manicured hand. "Schmidt," he said by way of an answer to a question I hadn't asked. Stephen Schmidt. And you are? Wyndham, I said, wearily shaking his hand. Captain Wyndham. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Wyndham. Miss Grant's mentioned you. She has? Yep, said you were a policeman. I'm glad you're here. I want to know what you're doing about the attack on the lady. I don't know why I'm doing the accent now.
I like it, it's good.
It's all right, I'll go with it then. If it gets offensive, do tell me. I want to know what you're doing about the attack on the lady. You mean the broken window? That's right. I hope you're here with good news. Not exactly. Schmidt shook his head as though I'd disappointed him on some fundamental level. Or maybe that it was just that I'd simply confirmed his low expectations of me. You need to catch those responsible and throw the book at them. I want them prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The truth was that I'd done very little, actually nothing, about the attack on Annie's house. After she'd turned down my ill-considered offer of posting a constable at the door, I'd had more pressing matters to deal with. Not that I was about to tell Schmidt. We're on the case, I said, and rest assured, we shall throw the book at the guilty party. Maybe even 2 books. Good, he said, pulling out an engraved silver cigarette case. Make sure you do. He opened it and offered me one. What brings you to Calcutta? I asked, accepting it. Business, he said, extracting a lighter. And what business would that be? Tea, he said with a flourish. I supply 2/5 of all the tea consumed in the northern Midwest. Is that a lot? I asked. I'd rather been under the impression that you Americans preferred dumping the stuff in Boston Harbor to drinking it. You better believe it. And you plan on staying long? The door opened and in walked Annie. She wore a blue silk dress and an ornate diamond-studded silver necklace. It looked like she was preparing to go out for the night. That's a good question, she said. How long do you plan on staying, Stephen? For the foreseeable, he smiled. That was rather longer than I'd been hoping for. Annie looked from him to me. I see you're both getting along. Absolutely, said Schmidt. Like a church on fire, I said. Can I get you a drink, Sam? She asked. Stephen's drinking bourbon. No, thank you, I said stiffly. I'm on duty. So what brings you here, Sam? She asked as she walked over to the drinks cabinet and prepared what I assumed was a pink gin. Have you caught the vandals who attacked my house? I was just telling Mr. Smith here. Schmidt, he corrected me. My apologies, Mr. Schmidt here, that we're working on it. I came round to see that everything was in order. Everything's fine, Sam, she said, turning and taking a sip of her drink. Thank you for your concern. Are you planning on going out tonight? I asked. Only you might want to reschedule. The roads are blocked. Really? said Schmidt. What is it this time? Another protest, I said. Don't these Indians ever get tired of it? They want to be rid of the King of England, I said. I'd have thought you as an American could be appreciative of that. Schmidt shook his head. Not if it means missing a dinner date with Miss Grant here. He knocked back the last of his bourbon. Come now, Annie, he said. If Wyndham's right and the roads are a mess, we should probably leave a little early. It wasn't what I'd meant. Instead of reschedule, I should have said cancel. Annie turned to me. You don't mind, do you, Sam? I just need a little of your time, I said. I turned to Schmidt. You don't mind if I speak to Miss Grant privately? I need to apprise her of certain developments, I lied. Schmidt eyed me dubiously, then looked to Annie. We have dinner reservations, he said. I'm sure whatever the captain has to tell me will only take a few minutes, she replied before walking towards the door. Absolutely, I said. An hour at most.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to open the floor to questions in a moment, but I will have one last question. As Anna mentioned, one of my jobs is teaching writing now. I teach at Goldsmiths. And so I am wondering if you each have a trick of the trade or a tip for storytelling that I could bring back. I actually have a class tomorrow. So is there some advice other than write what you know? He's putting you on the spot.
No, I'm going to listen to Lord Archer first. If anyone has the experience down to this.
It's the question I get most asked right across the world. And I think the funniest occasion was when an Indian journalist, I would say she was 25, 26, came in to the room I was doing interviews in, and she locked the door. And she sat down with me, and I was a little nervous, and she said, I want you to tell me the secret of storytelling. And I said, but it's a gift. I mean, You can't go down to Marks and Spencer's and buy a packet of storytelling. No, no, she said. No one will know. If you tell me, I promise I'll never tell. And I said, honestly, I don't have a secret. It's a gift. No, no, I'm not going to tell anyone. I want you to tell me. Ah, I said, right. I live in Cambridge, and each morning I get up when no one is looking, in the dark. And I go down to the river, which happens to run at the end of my garden. And I dig a hole when no one is looking. And there in the bottom of the hole is story after story after story. She stood up, walked out, unlocked the door, and disappeared. She was so angry.
Oh, she was looking for the hole.
It's a gift. And you can be a great writer if you're well educated, have a great command of language, you've read the classics. But once you say once upon a time, you're on your own.
So there's digging the hole. That's the one tip, digging the hole.
I just want to pick up on just that for a moment. Do you think it's a gift or a curse? Having these voices in your head all the time that people think you're mad. But you've got all these stories. So I don't know. I'd like to think it's a gift. I think if I made as much money as Lord Archer did, it would be a gift. Right now, it's just a curse. If I could give one tip.
If I might remind you, young man, that my first book, I had an advance of £3,000, and the 14 publishers turned the book down. They only published 3,000 copies. So don't let's have any of your elephant tears here, young man. Get a grip of yourself and take me on. Stop grumbling.
I don't think I can do that. What I would say in terms of a tip would be something that's, that might be useful is, let's talk about description. People think, and we were talking about this earlier, my Sam Wyndham in my head doesn't need to be the Sam Wyndham in your head. I don't want him to be the Sam Wyndham in your head. I want you to create Sam Wyndham. So to do that, I want to give you just little bits of detail, just little things, and you build the character around him, because it's about building a bubble and a world. And it's your world, it's not mine anymore. I want you to have that world. So say more with less. Just describe what you need to. Yes, exactly. One little item, one little piece of description can add more than a paragraph. And you just need to find what that little bit of description is. And that's the key. If there's one memorable thing about somebody, and you can do it in a humorous way, people will build their own image around the person from that one thing. That would be my tip. Let the reader do the work.
Very good. Let the reader do the work. Excellent. Now it is your turn to ask questions. Do we have a microphone? Yes, we have a microphone. So raise your hand, and then I will call on you, and then wait.
I hope my mum isn't going to ask any questions. Not allowed. My mum's gone to sleep. It's okay.
Do you want to ask any questions? It's always tough to. There we go.
Thank you very much. I mean, first this is a question to Lord Archer. It was Lord Archer. You've written some very powerful novels which I've enjoyed, and the character I found one of the characters I found very fascinating was in your novel First Among Equals, was the young black girl, and she was I think she was your adopted daughter of one of the characters, and she was a young black girl, and she had difficulty with her ethnicity, and she tried to scrub herself clean with a box of Daz. And it was a very powerful moment when actually you, as a conservative conservative politician, in the middle of Thatcher's Britain, was writing a story that actually was very, I suppose, not in the sense of what Thatcherism was about. And I thought a lot of what you write about is about fighting against the establishment. One of your characters, again, in First Among Equals, was a person who couldn't get into Oxford and went in and basically hammered at the door, which I did as well. Basically, I was very inspired by these sort of things. And I think, where do you see yourself as a writer in that sort of sense of liberation writing? It's a strange question to a Conservative peer, but there you go.
Well, and it's interesting too, because in a way it's the opposite. What our questioner is saying, and what he's describing reading is kind of the opposite of write what you know, because you're also imagining experiences that are not your experiences.
You're bound to do that a bit, but you do. I mean, not many people realise I have a black sister, and having had a black sister from a young age, who went to New York to work and has stayed there, who I adore, a lady called Elizabeth. When my father died, my mother married again, and she decided she couldn't have any more children, and we adopted a girl in Weston-super-Mare, who's one of my dearest and closest friends. So when I write that sort of thing, it's with experience of living with someone. She's very shy and doesn't ever want. I've never mentioned it in an article or an interview because she's never wanted to be in an article or an interview. But I come back to the point, and Abir does it brilliantly. Write about what you know about. I repeat, for the boredom's sake, I think I'm in India when I'm reading his books, and that's the greatest compliment I can pay him.
Who else? Who has another question?
Could we please keep it brief, because we are on a time
Yes,
scale.
indeed.
I'm
So
slightly deaf.
brief.
Okay. Hello, Jeffrey. Could you name one thing you enjoy about writing?
One thing I
One
enjoy.
thing you enjoy about writing.
Your turn.
No, he's asked you.
He's asked you.
I love it. Most people, I mean, I have friends who say, oh, Jeffrey, I can't write a letter. I can't write a paragraph. I love it. I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I go to my desk. I love it. I'm very, very lucky.
Is it just is that sense of invention, of sort of possibility that you have? Is that what you think?
Yes,
You
there's
love?
a bit of that. I write 6 until 8, 2-hour break, 10 until 12, 2-hour break, 2 until 4, 2-hour break, 6 until 8,
Wow.
light supper, bed by 9:30, 10, up again at 5:30. First draft, 50 days. This is the 14th draft, 1,000 hours later. I wish there was a shortcut, but I look at other people doing their jobs. I say to young people, go to the Bolshoi Ballet. And they say, what do you mean, Jeffrey, go to the Bolshoi Ballet? Sit in the Royal Opera House and look at the prima ballerina and imagine how many hours she spent to be the prima ballerina. Then look at the dancers behind her. Think how many hours they spent to be the dancers behind her. And then think of the thousands of people, thousands of young girls who will never get on that stage. It's no different for a writer, just as tough. But the one thing you have to do, however talented you imagine you are, hard work, damned hard work, is 9/10 of success.
Is there something you enjoy?
I have to agree with Lord Archer. It's empowering. You know, there's so much that I don't feel in control of in my life, but when you're staring at that screen or that page and you create that world, that everything is in your hands, it's empowering and it's exciting. And it's great. I mean, I feel like the luckiest person in the world to be able to do this. You know, my wife, my long-suffering wife, puts up with so much because I have kids and up till now a day job, which I'm giving up. But, you know, she's picked up the slack while I do what I love. And there's also this sense of guilt because of it. But it really is, it's wonderful to have this opportunity.
There's also that, I would say, it is under your control, but the sort of real, to me, the kind of magical moment is when suddenly it's not in your control and it takes on a kind of life of its own. And that's the sort of magic. Doesn't always happen. You hope it will happen. But that's marvelous too. Who else? We have time for maybe a couple more. this gentleman here.
This is to Lord Archer. Lord Archer, who's the better batsman, Joe Root? Or
Who's the better batsman, Joe Root?
Joe Root or Virat Kohli?
Or who?
Virat Kohli.
I think, I mean, you can't judge Kohli's, this young man knows more than I do. You cannot judge Kohli's career yet. But he's got to 10,000 test runs in a one-day cricket, 50 matches before Tendulkar. So if he can carry on, and he got a century 2 days ago against the West Indies, if he can carry on, I have no doubt that he will be the best that's ever lived. He'll be up there with Bradman. I myself have something else in common with Abir. We both think we should be captain of the England cricket team. I have wanted it from a young age. And indeed, on my 50th wedding anniversary, a gnome arrived on the end of the bed. And he said, Geoffrey, 50 years, that's pretty impressive. You can have a wish. And I said, well, I think everybody knows that I want to be captain of the England cricket team. And he said, but Geoffrey, you can't bat, you can't bowl, and you can't field. I suggest you try again. So I said, well, would it be possible for my wife, Mary, to listen to me occasionally? When we go on holiday, might I be allowed to give an opinion? Could she cook the occasional meal for me? And could, stop, said the genie. Do you want to open the batting or the bowling?
Can I just say I'm insulted by that, because I would be captain of Scotland. As we all know, Scotland beat England the last time they played.
I've now heard him say this twice.
Yeah, it's true. That's how true it is. And this is why I failed the Tebbit test. I fail it on 2 counts. I fail it because I support Scotland and India at cricket. So, and I think I should be allowed to do that, being Scottish.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Dream on.
There's a lady, I think, at the back. I saw a white sleeve. Raise your hand high. Sorry, it's a gentleman. Apologies. I could only see your sleeve, not your hand.
Sorry. Hi. I wanted to ask a question to both authors, actually. So, since we're talking about India, can I just ask what your favourite novels set in India are to each of you?
Favourite novel set in India. I'm actually going to change it. I'm going to make it my favourite novel from an Indian author, which is The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri, which is, you know, the quintessential immigrant story. You know, Bengali immigrants, but in this case going to America. And that's, my wife actually introduced that book to me, and, you know, I had to marry her after that. But, you know, it spoke to me in a way that no other book has spoken to me, because it captured the essence of what it is to be first and second generation immigrants in another society. And to me, that was, you know, mind-blowing when I read it.
For me, again, I'm going over here, I'm going to cheat a little and say that, just tell you my favourite novelist is Stefan Zweig. I think Beware of Pity is a masterpiece. Stefan Zweig was born in Austria, and at his height in 1932 and 1933 was the most popular author on earth. He left Austria when Hitler came into power. He went to New York. He only wrote 2 novels in his life, though he wrote many other books, all of them worth reading. And then he went to Brazil with his new young wife, and they committed suicide because they thought Hitler was going to win. The Pushkin Press decided to bring him back, and that's when I discovered him 15 years ago. And if nothing comes out of this evening, I'm going to read the book you recommended, and I saw you nodding away. I'm going to read that. But I would truly recommend you to read Beware of Pity by Stefan Zweig.
And on that literary recommendation, I'm afraid we're going to have to bring the evening to a close, because both of these wonderful authors will be signing their books. Please, will you join me in giving a big thank you to Geoffrey and to Abir.
Thank you so much.